Hey everyone, French Tutor here. I want to show you my personal system I use to make sure I get the best echoes I possibly can that's within my control. We're going to learn about what is considered a good echo, what kind of stats you should aim for, how to set goals for yourself, flowcharts when you're tuning, and much more. This guide is going to be mainly about building your main DPSs because it's going to heavily focus on crit damage and attack and other damage bonus stats. I also won't be teaching too much about the basics. If you want to learn about the basic echo system, I do have a beginner guide on that on the top right you can look at. Alright, let's get started. Okay, first, when you get into the echo grind, I feel like you need the proper mindset when you start tuning your echoes. So here are 4 rules I like to keep. 1. Keep your expectations low. The echo system is heavily influenced by RNG and random numbers. And there are a lot of things out of your control, so it'll drive you nuts if you expect too much. 2. Set low standards in the beginning. You're not going to get all double crit echoes right from the start. You're also not going to get like 3 other priority substats in the beginning too. And in general, that's also pretty unrealistic actually. But 3. Stay positive and hopeful. Play the numbers game and good substats will come. Lastly, number 4, be goal-oriented with direction. You need to know what you want and what you're doing. You need some type of direction or you're going to end up disappointed because you're not sure what you're trying to get, and then, visibly the stats might not look good, and then you get very, very discouraged. So we want to set short-term and long-term goals to see what you actually want. It really helps you move on because you know what you need, and that when you see something you don't need, you just kind of say like, hey, this is not what I need, let's move on. So the mentality kind of helps that way. And to sum it all up, remember, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So when and how do we start the echo grind? So I would say start at Union level 40 at Data Bank level 21. That's when you can get 100% chance of getting 5-star echoes. But you should start learning a few basics starting at Union level 30 at Data Bank level 17. But the time that you heavily focus on substats and stuff like that should start around Union level 40, Data Bank level 21. And make sure when you're at Union level 40 and you're at the new Soul 3 phase, just make sure to, level up all your skills, your weapons, your characters, ascend them. And later on, you can start doing tacit fields and farm for echoes. But the most important thing, I feel like when people say that, it's really hard for them to get substats and the RNG is really bad for them, increase your numbers. Start farming for echoes in the overworld. So this might not be a thing for everyone, but the game is designed so that you can unlimited kind of farm for echoes in the overworld. Every day they reset and you can just increase your odds of getting better echoes like this. So if you feel like you had bad luck, try this way. Start making a farming route. Pick a character you really like and someone you really want to build. That's going to help you drive to farm for those characters. So when you start farming for echoes in the overworld, make sure to take some sweet and sour pork. It's going to increase your echo drop rate by 50%, and that's going to really help you out. Okay, so which substats should we prioritize? Priority number 1 is going to be crit rate or crit damage. Sometimes you're going to need one more than the other. It depends on if your weapon has crit rate or crit damage. Your inherent skills might give you bonus crit rate, crit damage, and then your sequence nodes, and then some of the Sonata sets also give you crit rate or something like that. So sometimes one of them has priority over the other. The second priority is going to be attack percent. Attack percent boosts a lot of damage and helps you give a general overall damage to all your skills. Attack percent is going to help your Resonance Liberation damage, your Resonance skill damage, just everything. Your intro skill, your echo skill, everything. For attack percent pieces, I generally try to aim for at least 2 to 3 echoes to have attack percent to get a good amount of damage along with a good balance of crit rate and crit damage. The next things you want to look for are flat attack, your primary damage bonus, and your secondary damage bonus. So usually each character has a breakdown of how much damage they do for each skill. Usually 4-star characters, they do a good amount of overall damage with all their skills. But with 5-star characters, they do a lot of damage with one certain type of skill. For example, Encore does a lot of basic attack damage, right? So that would be her primary source of damage, and it would be really good to aim for that substat. And for Carlotta, she does a lot of resonance skill damage bonus. And then a secondary damage bonus is good too. So a lot of times liberation damage would work. But it really depends on your character. Make sure you do your research about your characters before you start farming and tuning your echoes. Priority number 3 is energy regen. I feel like most characters need about 1 or 2 energy regen pieces just to have a good uptime on their liberation. It really depends, but I feel like there are characters without energy regen, it gets really hard to get their liberation up. Of course, there will be some exceptions for some characters in the future, so make sure you do your research on how to build them. For example, there might be a character in the future who scales off of defense, or maybe even HP percent. They might be stronger with HP or something like that. But these are general stats that are usually good for most main DPSs as of now. So what is considered a good echo? That's actually a very subjective question, but we need to set some kind of standard. You have to know if this echo is good enough for you, or if it's just even a good echo at all, so that you can just maybe even stop and then save some resources. And it also depends on where you are in the game. Are you in the early game phase, in the mid game phase, or the late game phase? So before I explain an echo tier list and the stages of the echo grind, I want to first talk about the 15 to 7.5 standard. So here's a chart with all the ranges you can get with crit rate and crit damage. So for me, a healthy standard is telling myself that, hey, 15% crit damage is considered good. And for crit rate, that value would be 7.5%. So for me, this would be considered the midpoint. So for me, if I'm in the mid game or late game, this is the standard I want. I want at least 15% crit damage and at least 7.5 crit rate. Because crit rate could go down to 6.9 and 6.3, and I think that's a little too low in the late game. Crit damage can go down to 13.8 and 12.6. I think that is also a little too low in the late game. But also, when you do have double crit echoes, you can also balance out the ratio a little bit. So for example, let's say if I go up 1, I can get a 16.2 crit damage piece, and then getting a 6.9 crit rate would kind of balance that, right? It doesn't always have to be 15% crit damage and 7.5 crit rate, or 16.2 crit damage and 8.1 crit rate. So there's a certain balance. You don't have to worry too much about this when you're first starting your echo grind. Don't set any standards like this, but it's something for you to know later. Lastly, you can set your own standard. This might be too low for you actually, but this is what keeps me sane. And I know I feel much better knowing that at least 15 and 7.5 crit rate is good enough for me. So if you you can set your own standard, but I feel with this system, it really keeps me sane from doing my echo grinding and tuning. And now here's a quick echo tier list that I made up. This is a system I use to know how good an echo is for me. Okay, so at tier 1, we have a single crit echo piece. And a tier 2 echo would be a low double crit. So anything below 15% crit damage or 7.5 crit rate would be considered tier 2. Tier 3 would be a mid-high double crit or a low double crit plus 1 priority substat. So again, at a mid-high double crit would be starting from 15% crit damage and 7.5 crit rate. Once you get that, you kind of start getting better echoes, and that would be considered tier 3. Also, a low double crit with 1 priority substat like attack percent or primary damage bonus would be really good too. Now at tier 4, you get a mid-high double crit plus 1 priority substat. That's actually really good to have. Or tier 4 could be a low double crit plus 2 priority substats. And finally, at tier 5, we're going to have a mid-high double crit plus 2 priority substats. And that's extremely hard to get. Also, a low double crit plus 3 priority substats would be great as well, but kind of unlikely actually. But funny enough, it's kind of realistic because I feel with the Echo RNG, if they give you 3 priority substats, they try to balance it out by giving you very low crit damage and rate. And then lastly, I feel this should be in another tier, but I just didn't want to make it more complicated. But a mid-high double crit plus 3 priority substats. I would consider this high tier of tier 5. That's obviously something that everyone wants, but those are super rare. Don't try to aim for that. It's just you really don't need to get 3 priority substats, the perfect echo. That's definitely more late endgame. So yeah, here's my little tier list of showing you what's considered a good echo. And also I mentioned to see how good an echo is, it really depends where you are in the phase of your echo grind. Also, I feel like once you split like each phase of the echo grind, like you'll know what kind of echoes you should be getting at that stage in the game. So you won't drive yourself nuts trying to get a tier 4 or 5 echo in the early game, which is really hard because you won't have enough resources to get your echoes to level 20 and 25. And it's very unrealistic, so we should set some kind of limit for each phase of the game. So I'm going to split the phases of the echo grind by 3 of them. So there's the early game phase, which is union level 40 to 50, the mid game phase, union level 50 to 60, and the end game phase at union level 60 and plus. So I'd say for the early game phase, try to go for tier 1 to 3 echoes. Even a single crit stat is very valuable in the early game, and sometimes you might get low double crits with like a priority substat, and you should really celebrate. Now for the mid game phase from union level 50 to 60, we're still going to have some single crit pieces. It's going to be pretty hard to get everything to double crit for a while. But now starting around this phase, you'll start hitting like mid-high double crits with like a priority substat, or like a low double crit with 2 priority substats. Maybe that might be a little toward end of the mid-game phase, but yes, those are possible. And at the end game, we're going to start focusing from tier 3 to 5. We're going to try to stray away from getting like just single crit pieces. You still might have some single crit pieces, but still try to get more double crits, especially mid-high ones. And then you can start getting like mid-high double crits, maybe even with 2 priority substats. So yeah, figure out where you are in the phase of the echo grind and go from there. Okay, so now let's talk about stat goals. There are specific numbers of crit rate and crit damage that everyone wants to meet. Usually you're going to want a 1 to 2 crit rate to crit damage ratio. So the math looks a little off here, but then, there's a way to actually calculate it. So let me just explain this briefly. So basically, if you look at any character that has like no equipment, no like bonus stats or anything like that with extra crit rate or crit damage, usually they're going to start with 5% base crit rate and then 150% crit damage. So in order to calculate this, just this 5% crit rate, you're just going to get it for free. It's a bonus, okay? So this we keep, right? But this 150% crit damage is a little excessive and it doesn't really make sense. So what players do is they subtract 100 from this. So think of this as like 5% crit rate and 50% crit damage. So when you read other builds, let's say with my Encore here, so she's going to have a very standard build. So if we do the math, we'll subtract 100% crit damage from here, and she'll have about 122% crit damage. And then 65 crit rate. So from here, I actually want at least 230 crit damage here to make this, like a good ratio. Since you get added crit rate and crit damage from weapons and from like bonus stats, you want to kind of subtract them from this stat page to see what your actual crit rate and crit damage might be, but it does get complicated. It doesn't always make sense because it really influences your build for your echoes. So later, I'm actually going to show you my way of calculating stats. It's kind of odd too, like no one really talks about it, but I think it works for me, and I think I found a good system of how it works. Anyways, the point is like one of the goals, like one of your first goals, like I'd say more around mid-game, like in the mid-game phase goal is like 50% crit rate and 200% crit damage, right? So that would be 50% crit rate to essentially 100% crit damage, right? So it would be a 1 to 2 ratio. That's one of like the first goals that people meet, but that is going to take a little bit. So I feel like we need to go back a little bit. I'd say like with your goals, just start low. Just pick any crit rate, like 35% or 40% crit rate, right? And then just double that and you'll get the crit damage that you want. And I guess add 100% to kind of read it correctly in the stat page. So yeah, here's a little chart. Like start with these crit rates, right? Start with like low, start like 30% crit rate, and then 40% crit rate, and then work your way up to 50% crit rate. And that's like a good mid-game start. And I'd say just to have like a good amount of crit rate, I would say is 65%. Like it's just good though. It's like average. Because I think the endgame target is actually 70% crit rate, in my opinion. Because anytime I have like 70% crit rate, like the amounts of crits are so much more different than 65%. I don't know why. So yeah, you'll get consistent crits at 70%. So if I want 70% crit rate here, I want at least 240% crit damage to get that 1 to 2 ratio. Lastly, if you want, you can try to get to 75% crit rate to 250% crit damage. And that's kind of like godlike and very like end game. But this whole stat goal thing kind of goes out the window. This whole 1 to 2 crit rate or crit damage ratio, it goes out the window when your weapon, like let's say for Phoebe, she has like 36% crit rate. And then I have like crit damage for my stat bonuses. Then a lot of it doesn't make any sense. So you have two choices here. You can either build your characters comfortably and still match that 1 to 2 crit rate crit damage ratio. So you wouldn't have to invest too much into your echoes. But if you're a little hardcore and you want like the very best for your characters, then you just go all out with your stats. So that's for me with my Phoebe, right? So I want my long-term goal here, if I look at this, I just want to get to 80% crit rate, and then I'll get 20% extra crit rate from her Sonata set, and then I want 300% crit damage because I'm so close. So that's just my end goal when I just see this visually, right? So yeah, these goals, like they could be very personal to you, and I guess it gets a little more personal and confusing once your weapons and your skills start giving you crit rate and crit damage. So see what works for you, set your short-term and your long-term goals, okay? And there is one target number that a lot of people are hyper-focused on to get with their characters, and it's the attack, and everyone wants at least 2,000 attack for some reason. So I think that's a very end game like attack you want to get, because like being level 90 and having a level 90 weapon is going to heavily influence this number. So yeah, start off with like a little bit lower. Start with like, oh, I want to get at least 1750 attack, and then 1800, and then 1850, and so on. Work your way up, but that standard golden number people want to get is about 2000 attack. So try to get some attack percent and flat attack pieces on your echoes to achieve that. You will hit much harder when you like crit pretty much. I do want to note that base attacks for every character is different. 5-star characters have higher base attacks as well. I'd say don't worry too much about the attack stat, but if you're close to 2000, why not go for it? But like I said, try to get 2 to 3 echoes that have attack percent. I feel like that's the better goal than to actually look at the attack stat. Okay, I mentioned this in a previous video before, but this is how I calculate my crit rate and crit damage ratio. You still want 1 to 2, but in order to even this up, what I do is I actually unequip my 4-cost echo that has crit rate or crit damage, and then I can see more clearly what my ratio looks like with 4 of my other echoes. So for now, most characters, besides any characters using the new Eternal Radiance Spectral set, who are like hyper fixated on getting crit damage, these usually balance out for most characters if you unequip your 4-cost echo. So you can see here clearly, this is kind of more close to a 1 to 2 ratio. So after like looking at my other characters and testing their crit rate and crit damage, I found that 30% crit rate and 60% crit damage is like a good average ratio you want during like the, I'd say like late mid game, and like late game is fine too. Like it's like good average, and it's like good enough for like the tower, I'd say. Or you might need a little more for like the middle tower, the harder part in the Tower of Adversity. But I'd still consider that good. 30% crit rate, 60% crit damage. But here's my chart of what I think you should aim for while you gradually try to get better stats. I think the end game targets and trying to like become even more meta, right, is start with like 32.5 crit rate to get like 65% crit damage. And then like once you get like 35% crit rate to 70% crit damage, that's like really, really, really good. That could be like a very strong end game target to hit. And then like, well, 37.5% crit rate to 75% crit damage, that's kind of like godlike. That's like when your like echoes are just like extremely good. But of course your 4-cost echoes like crit rate and crit damage is missing from this puzzle. Just make sure to have a good ratio of 1 to 2 crit rate, crit damage, double crit on it, and then it should be fine. Like you can calculate it separately, but this is just calculating these 4 echoes right here. The system is not really a thing, but you can give it a shot. I think it works really well for me, and I think I found a little system of like how it works. Lastly, set some general short-term and long-term goals. So an example of a very short-term goal would be like, I want to get at least a low double crit echo. And that could be a good short-term goal in the early game. And maybe the next step could be I want at least one echo with mid-high double crit. And some long-term goals that you can look at is something like I want all 5 echoes to have double crit. And you can just keep working your way up to those goals, and then you're focused and it helps you like farm for more echoes, and it just like helps you like make you like work hard to get the stats and echoes you desire. Because if there are no goals, then you're not really going to, really care too much, and that's fine too. But if you want to like progress better in like endgame content and make your characters the strongest they can be, like goals really help you out. And it just affects how you tune your echoes too. Like if I tune something and the crit damage or crit rate is too low and I need a certain amount, I might just move on to the next echo and then I would save some resources there. So yeah, give it a shot. Now I actually want to talk about some questions you should ask yourself while you're tuning echoes. I think like the most common question to ask yourself is, what cost echo am I leveling? Because not all echoes are created equal. For example, cost 3 echoes and cost 4 echoes are very rare. So in that type of case, I would use more resources in these because it's going to be very hard for me to get the correct main stats of like the attribute bonus. So I might tune one line, and even if it's not good, I might go to the next step very easily because, these are just so rare. However, like 1 cost echoes, like they're just a lot easier to get. You'll get these more from farming in the overworld. And these 1 cost echoes only have 3 main stats to compete against, right? Attack percent, defense percent, and HP percent. So you can get this a lot more easier. But by the way, it seems like attack percent just feels a lot more rare. But in any case, yeah, you can get a lot of these. So you don't have to spend too many resources on these, right? Like you can just like get away with just like leveling them to maybe the first or second line and then just move on, because like these are just a dime a dozen, right? And cost 4 echoes are so rare too, right? It's so hard to get like crit rate, crit damage sometimes. Like it's their own type of rare compared to like cost 3 echoes. But yeah, definitely more rare than getting like cost 1 echoes. So prioritize your cost 3 echoes and your cost 4 echoes. Another question to ask yourself is, am I low on resources? And after like experimenting on this guide, yes, I am very low on resources. But yes, that is going to affect you heavily on how you go about tuning your echoes. You'll be able to level up and tune more if you have more resources. So always make sure to like keep an eye on your resources and then just see like how much you should really use. Another question you can ask yourself is, how many echoes do I have with the correct main stat? This actually does affect how you tune your echoes. So let's say I have like only 3 of these attack percent arrow echoes. I might end up spending a lot of resources trying to get the best stats out of them. So what you should be doing, always try to like expand your numbers. Try to get like 10 or get 20 or even 30. If you had more echoes, you would save your resources more. And to get more echoes, like without using resources, like I said, farm in the overworld. Like just look at these 3 cost echoes. I only have 3, so I'm gonna try to like use a lot of resources on these. Like no matter what substats I get, maybe. Like I might feel desperate. I might use too many resources. I might even go to level 25 when I don't need to. So like realistically, if I farmed and did some tested fields, like if I had like 10 or 15, I would probably like, spend my resources in a more efficient way. And then of course we want to farm for our 4 cost echoes as well. So you want to get all these kind of crits too, right? And a very underrated question to ask is, am I leveling an echo I already have equipped? Okay, what does that even mean? So I farm for a lot of these Dearness Knights and these Rage Against the Statues. But when I'm leveling up another one, they are directly competing with the one I have equipped, right? So for example, this one, right, like I need to like tune and get something higher than 15% crit damage and something higher than 6.3 crit rate, which should be easy. So sometimes like once you immediately know, like, okay, like if I'm leveling this one, I have 7.5 crit rate, which is a little bit higher than this, right? So I keep going with this echo, right? Or sometimes you might not get like good enough stats and you can compare it directly, like, okay, these already are not good enough, so I don't need to spend more resources on this one. So even in this case, I might want to even farm like different kinds of echoes too now. Because maybe like this echo, I mean the stats are not too high, right? But it might be hard to compete with this one because that means I need like at least this much amount of crit damage or even higher, or just a lot higher crit rate, right? So then it gets a little tough with like competing with your same echoes that you have equipped. So yeah, just a little thing to keep in mind, and I think worth mentioning. I know a lot of people came here for the flowcharts and not all these stat goal stuff, but it is pretty helpful, and if you found it helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. This video took a lot of time and resources, so I would really greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to talk about how to like tune your echoes really quickly. First, you can do them automatically or you can do them manually. Manually, you would just click on these, right? Usually to get to level 5. 5 blue ones, 5 to 5 is a little rule I use. You can get to level 5 that way, or you can use 1 gold seal tube, that works too, but make sure to do that more like in the end game. So manually leveling your echoes are really good, like if you want to get to higher levels faster instead of doing line by line. But I think one of the best things to learn while doing manual leveling is that you can actually visually see like how many resources you are using. So I think everyone should start learning how to manually level their echoes first. And then when you click add by step, it's going to level your echoes in intervals of 5. And the good thing about this method is that you're going to go step by step in intervals, right? And then it kind of helps you use your experience materials more efficiently. Like it goes step by step so that you don't go overboard. So I think this is very good at like saving resources. Okay, and just real quick, so to understand my flowcharts, I actually level my cost 3 and 4 echoes differently from my cost 1 echoes. For my cost 3 and 4 echoes, because they're so rare, usually I am going to go all the way up to level 10 first, right off the bat. So I'm gonna just upgrade like this. And then when I tune it, I don't do it one at a time. I actually like to tune multiple times. There are times where you can do this, but for like specifically for cost 3 and 4 echoes, I do it this way. Because I feel like even if the first substat is like horrible or like really bad, like flat HP for like your cost 3 or 4 echoes, it's still like they are so rare that you still want to see what the next substats will be. You want to give these a chance. You want to be a little more lenient with these because they are just so rare. Like trying to find like the correct like main stat for cost 3 and 4 echoes is just extremely hard. So yeah, this is how I do it. I really don't think there's any time where you would just level it once and tune it once and then just stop. But in case, I like doing these double tuning kind of things. Like this is my method, so I'm gonna be doing this in my guide, and boom, there you go, already crit rate and resident skill damage, so that's cool. Okay, now after all that talking, finally we're going to start our flowchart. I've been testing and leveling a lot of echoes. If you can see here, these 15s, these 10s and 5s, a lot of 5s on the cost 1s, and then just a lot of these cost 3s, like on 2 accounts, just to make sure my flowchart is accurate. I tested all these echoes to see like what works and what doesn't. And I made sure like things seem very realistic. But please keep in mind that everyone has a different approach to tuning their echoes. You might look at my flowchart and think like, oh no, maybe in this case I wouldn't go that far, or oh yes, like I would probably go like one more level and try to tune more. So everyone's standards are different. So like when I'm explaining the flowchart, I will explain like if there are some like instances where we could have differing opinions and different standards. But I think on average, like the flowchart is like pretty like accurate and like pretty like decent. I've also had to play on like free to play accounts just to see how like people actually manage the resources with so limited like seal tubes and tuners. So a lot of thought and like work has gone into this video. So yeah, please just enjoy and let's see what we can learn together. Okay, let's start our flowchart. We're going to start from the early game phase from Union level 40 to 50, and we're going to start with our cost 1 echoes. So at this phase in the game, I would only go up to level 15 with your 1 cost echoes. Why? Well, first, at this stage, right now in this phase, you're going to be very low on resources, and you don't want to spend too much on echoes that give you attack percent. I mean, attack percent is great, right? But like 3 cost echoes that give like attribute damage bonus, like they'll give you a lot more damage. So I don't think it's worth it to tune all the way up to 20. So the resources you need to get from level 15 to 20 is actually the same amount to get an echo from 0 to level 15. So that's a whole nother echo you can be leveling, and that's more chances you can get like crit rate and crit damage, right? So it's not worth it in my opinion in the beginning early phase of the game. Okay, so now let's say we level to 5 and then we tune an echo. You want to ask yourself, did I get a crit or a priority substat? If yes, continue and level more. If not, just stop. You're gonna get so many of these one cost echoes later so that, it's not even worth it to go beyond the first line if it's like a non-priority substat. So at level 5, there actually are two other options early in the beginning. So some people only continue when they get a crit on the first line. So that's up to you, and that does save a lot of resources, but it's a rare occurrence that you will get a crit on the first line, especially when you don't have that many one cost echoes yet. But if that's how you want to proceed, go ahead. Also, like if you're in the very, very, very early game and this is like your first 5-star one cost echo, you might even go beyond the first line no matter what it is. Just because you want some extra damage, then that is an exception to this rule as well. So let's say we tuned the first line and we got attack percent, that is a good priority substat, you want to continue from here. And if you get something like defense percent or flat HP, just stop. And again, some people like doing it this method. So if, for example, I got a crit rate on my first line here, so now I have a higher chance of getting crit in my other lines as well. So this is another way you can do this. Okay, now for level 10 tuned, you want to ask yourself, do I have at least one crit stat or two priority substats? If yes, tune to level 15 and stop from there. Honestly, it's best to get a crit stat by level 10 at this stage in the game, but if you have enough resources, like two priority substats may be worth leveling. And it kind of makes sense too because you don't have that many one cost echoes as well. So for this echo, I actually got a crit rate on the second line and also flat attack. So yes, definitely you want to keep going to level 15. And this is an example of two priority substats. We have energy regen and then basic attack damage bonus. Let's say for Camellia, that would be considered two priority substats, and we would move on from here and upgrade to 15. Once we get to level 15, I'd say we stop here at this phase in the game. It's not exactly a double crit, but there's no reason not to continue like once you have more resources and when you have more one cost echoes to work with. So right now, if I leveled this to 20, the same amount of resources, I can get another one cost echo to level 15. So what you want to do is you just want to wait. Save this echo for later. You can level it later when you're like Union 50 to 60, when you're in the mid game phase. Yeah, so you gotta play the waiting game just a little bit and you'll save more resources, I promise you. Okay, so now how do we deal with these cost 3 and 4 echoes in the early game phase? So these 3 cost echoes are super rare, especially early in the game. You're probably gonna get like one of your first ones from a malleable elite class echo box. So yeah, once you get these, like I said, I like to go straight to level 10 right away. So the first step is once you get to level 10 and you tune it, you want to ask yourself, did I get a crit stat or two priority substats? If it's a yes, level more. If it's a no, there's actually another question you can ask. Do I have at least one priority substat? If that's a yes, save it for later in the mid game. Right now, it might not be the best to use your resources now, but just save it. You don't have to, just throw them away or just like waste your resources here. You can always wait, okay? But if not, if you don't have even at least one priority substat, I would just discard it. It's not worth leveling more if you don't even have one priority substat. So if you get a 4 cost echo with crit rate, you definitely want to move on. Doesn't really matter which, if it's like a priority or a non-priority substat. And if you got 2 priority substats like flat attack and attack percent, I would definitely level to 15 as well and then tune it. So again, this is the case where you kind of want to save for later. So like you got one priority here, let's say basic attack damage bonus for fusion. This would be good for encore, but then you get a non-priority substat like defense percent, right? And right now you don't have to level this right now. Let's save this one for later. Okay, now once you get to level 15 and you have your echo tuned, you should ask yourself the question, did I get a double crit or a single crit with 2 priority substats? So this is completely optional. If yes, you can level to 20 and stop. But a few things, if you have double crit by level 15, you really don't have to go to level 20. Because the main goal right now is to get double crit early as possible, and an extra substat at level 20 won't do much, and it takes a lot of resources to get there. And also, if you have a single crit stat and like 1 or 2 priority substats, it's probably best to save it for later, honestly, also, and then you can level it later to 20 next time. So this is more of an optional thing. Double crit, it's, you definitely want to feel like you want to level more, and you can if you want, because I know that feeling. So this is kind of an example of an echo at level 15. You have 1 crit and then 2 priority substats. So this would be pretty good with Changli. And then yeah, it looks really tempting to try for the next 2 lines, right? Try to get another crit damage, right? But it's too many resources. You can try at least to level 20, but I would not recommend level 25. But I'll be honest, if this was me and this is like my first like 3 cost echo, I would go to level 20, honestly. Okay, this might be another example. 1 crit and 1 priority substat. Crit is kind of low and it's flat attack here too. This might be one where you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can save this one for later. Okay, now let's go to the mid-game phase from Union level 50 to 60. So first, what changes? So first, with cost 1 echoes, now you can get to level 20 if certain requirements are met. You have more resources now, you can get more 1 cost echoes, so yeah, it's worth it now. And you can freely level your cost 3 echoes to level 20 as well too. You also want to focus on trying to get double crits now. Single crits are still good in the early game and like the early mid game, but you definitely want to start trying to get more double crits since that you can get up to level 20 more easily now. And if you can, try to apply the 15 to 7.5 standard towards the end of the mid game phase. Like you do want higher values of crit rate and crit damage too, and that's something to consider like during the late part of the mid game phase. And also, if certain requirements are met, like yes, you can get to level 25 as well. It does take a lot of resources, but if the echoes are worth it, then you might have to, you just have to go for it, Okay, so for level 5 tune, nothing much changes. Like you ask yourself, did I get a crit or a priority substat? Yes, level more. No, just stop, discard it. At this point, if you get a non-priority substat, I would just even discard them. Like you can keep them later, like let's say you use all your 1 cost echoes and you just have a lot of resources for some reason, you might, just level them to 10 or 15 for fun, but I don't recommend that, honestly. At level 10 tuned, do you have at least 1 crit stat or 1 priority substat? If yes, level more. If no, stop. Okay, now level 15 tune is a bit different now. You want to ask yourself, do I have double crit or 1 mid-high crit plus 1 priority substat? If yes, level to 20. But even the mid-high crit with 1 priority substat is still a little risky. It's better to maybe even save this one for the late stage, but if you would like to, go ahead. If no, stop. And if you have a low crit with like a priority substat, I would just save that one for later. So let's say I got a double crit like this echo, I would just go for it even though I have a non-priority substat. It's really hard to get a priority substat here already in the 3rd line, so you'll probably get one by 20 or 25. So here is actually a low crit with 1 priority substat, so this one gets a little tricky, right? Because yeah, it does look tempting to get to level 20 and you use the resources. I feel like you can still wait on this just a little bit. I feel like maybe you can level this later. I wouldn't discard these. Definitely a single crit at this stage, at this phase, is pretty good still. But yeah, I would say use these resources of getting to level 20 to make maybe even like 2 level 10 echoes. And I feel like you would even get better like crit stats or even more like priority substats. But it's up to you because this does look very tempting to level up as well, right? So at level 20 tuned, you can ask yourself, do I have a mid-high double crit with 1 priority substat or a high double crit? So this is the first time I'm mentioning a high double crit because that's when it would be really worth it to like level an echo. So like your high double crit would be like crit rates like around like 9% and crit damage is around 18 or 19%, like kind of those values. then I feel like it's justifying to get to level 25, but it uses a lot of resources. Like going from level 20 to 25, I believe you can get an echo to like level 18, I believe. So it's just too many resources. If you already have double crit at this point, I don't think an extra substat will help you right now. I feel like you should save it for later, but honestly, like if it's, it's just a one cost echo, that extra attack percent on the main stat won't help as much. It just kind of satisfies your need to get like a perfect echo, you know? So yeah, like if you have like a ridiculously like good echo, then I'd say go ahead. So I couldn't find a perfect example, but let's just say this heavy attack is like a priority substat for a certain character. And we got a good, mid-high double crit here with a priority substat. Yes, it looks very tempting to level up, right? So it's up to you. But if you're low on resources, I wouldn't recommend it. Now for cost 3 and 4 echoes. Nothing much changes at level 10 tuned. Did I get a crit or a priority substat? Yes, level more. No, just stop. But at level 15 tune, it changes just a little bit. You could be a little more lenient. You can ask yourself, did I get a double crit? Or do I have one crit stat plus one priority substat? So yes, now you have a little more flexibility to get from level 15 to 20. Some people still might not level the one crit with one priority substat. They might feel like it's still a waste of resources. And it is kind of risky, but I would still say like at this mid-game phase, you can go there if you like. But if you're low on resources, don't. Just stop at level 15. And just save it for later at the late game. So this is a good example here. If you have like mid-high crit damage here and resonant skill for my Colada, yes, I can, like if I had the resources, I would definitely get to level 20 here. But if you're low on resources, you can wait a bit. Finally, at level 20 tuned, you can ask yourself, do I have a mid-high double crit with one priority substat or a high double crit stats? If yes, level to 25, but if you're low on resources, I would save it for later. If no, don't go for it. I think it's just too many resources to spend on that kind of echo. I think having like good like mid-high double crit stats are important here in the mid-game. So this is a good example right here. Let's say this is a piece for Encore, has basic attack damage for my priority substat, and then mid-high double crit. If I have the resources, yeah, I'll go for it. And it's honestly just to satisfy my own needs. In the mid game, if I saw something like this, I would go for it. But if you're low on resources, don't do it. Okay, now we're getting to the end game phase at Union level 60 and up. So now what exactly changes from here? Well, after maxing out your main DPSs and some of your characters, building the rest of your teams, you'll be farming mostly tacit fields and doing fantasies of the 1,000 gateways if you like. You get a lot more resources pretty much. So getting to level 25 is going to be a lot easier. Which means you'll get more chances of getting double crit. And a lot of people get crit at the last line at level 25 too. So generally, you might be replacing a lot of your current echoes. They might have like low double crit, or they might not have enough priority substats, or maybe you have like the wrong like bonus damage for like each character. Another thing I wanted to mention before is that you are going to be competing with a lot of the same echoes as well. So let's say, for example, I have this piece for my Encore. So yeah, so like this piece, it does have like mid-high crit when you balance them out, but it has resonant skill damage. I don't really want that for my Encore, right? So let's say this coming Echo, I have even higher mid-high crit, and then I have basic attack damage bonus here. So there are times where, like maybe during the late end game, like I want to start replacing my pieces like these and try to replace them and get better echoes for myself. And yeah, you will have resources to do that. Like in the end, you might just be, just farming Tesla fields all day and every day. So yeah. Another thing worth mentioning is you can be a little bit more stricter with like your echoes too, okay? So it's not just that you can get to level 25, you might have even higher standards now. So that can really affect your flowchart here. So I'm gonna kind of say what I would do, and then let's talk about our different options. Okay, so starting with one cost echoes, again, level 5 tuned, we ask ourselves, did I get a crit stat or a priority substat? If yes, level more. If no, you can just stop from here. But I think now level 10 tuned gets a little tricky. You can ask yourself, do I have at least one crit stat or 1 to 2 priority substats? So this 1 to 2 priority substats is based on like how you feel, what you think is a good standard for you. I think you should start picking one. Like it really depends like where you are in the late game as well. Like you can be a little more lenient and just require one priority substat, but if you want to be a little more strict, you can go with 2 priority substats. So if yes, level more, if not, stop. And you can be even stricter, requiring 1 crit stat at level 10 and then move on. Honestly, for me, I think I'm okay with just even 1 priority substat. But if I was low on resources, maybe like 2 priority substats. Like I think this is a good example for like Encore, like these are 2 priority substats. Like there's no reason for me not to level this up. Okay, and at level 15 tuned, you can ask yourself, do I have a mid-high double crit or 1 mid-high crit plus 1 priority substat? So it doesn't matter if I have a priority substat for my mid-high double crit, like I have 2 other chances to get them, or even one more, like just one more line would be great. And for the mid-high crit, you do have 2 other chances to go, so I'd say this is okay, as long as you have 1 priority substat. And if no, stop. Okay, I think at level 20 tune, things change. I think you should ask yourself, do I have a mid-high double crit? Or does this echo have the potential to be better than my current echoes? Because if you have like a mid-high double crit, especially on the higher side, it's very tempting not to go to level 25 obviously, and you do have the resources, and I'm pretty sure you're at least going to get 1 priority substat. A little risky though. And for 3 cost echoes at level 10 tuned, we ask ourselves, did I get a crit or a priority substat? Yes, level more, no, stop. I would just keep this one the same. But now at level 15 tuned, I would ask myself this, like did I get a double crit or 1 crit plus 1 priority substat? But now you should actually set a standard here for your double crit. Do you want low double crit or a mid-high double crit? And I think that's an important question to ask for yourself, like depending on where you are in the end game. So set that standard for yourself. If yes, level and tune to level 20. If not, stop. And for me, honestly, at my point, like I'm union level 80, I would probably not go with a low double crit unless I'm just building a new character. But if it's like I already have like decent crits, I would just probably set a standard of only mid-high double crit at this stage. So for example, let's say this one is a crit with a priority substat with liberation damage bonus. Yeah, I would definitely level this up. Okay, and the same drill for level 20 tuned. Do I have a mid-high double crit, or does this echo have the potential to be better than my equipped echoes? So again, if you have mid-high double crit, I feel like you will get 1 priority substat. A little risky again. Do it if you have a lot of resources. Also, real quick, I just want to talk about the double tuning method a little bit more. So as you saw, I've been just double tuning my cost 3 and 4 echoes. It's just a personal thing. Like for some reason, I feel like when I tune like multiple lines, like especially just like 2, like I seem to have pretty good luck with it. I know it sounds like little like a superstition, but it works for me. So I just wanted to share it. So sometimes when I get a crit and a priority substat on my cost 3 or 4 echoes, I actually do another double tune. Like I am going to level 20 regardless. So just wanted to share, like I've been doing it like that and I've been getting pretty good substats. And it's not shown because I couldn't get a good example, but I also do this when with my cost 1 echoes when my first line is crit. Then I just do a double tune. And also I kind of want to share another method that's pretty risky. It uses a lot of resources. I don't recommend it anymore. But it's something I did before early in the game when the game first started. And I know a lot of players do this too, so I just want to put it out there. I call this the 25 to 22 to 20 method. Basically, a lot of players like to feed a level 25 echo into a level 0 echo, then you'll get a level 22 echo. And they tune everything 4 lines from there and see what they get. And when they repeat the process, you go from level 22 to level 20. But when you do it like this, you don't get all the experience back from the previous echo. You get a certain amount of experience. As you can see, like a 25 echo turns into a level 22 echo, right? And then you keep going pretty much. And usually you're going to hit, from 20, you'll go to 17, and then 17 to 15. But sometimes it's 20 to 18 to 16. So you kind of repeat that process until you get good stats. And if you're playing the RNG game, yes, like this could work, and it did work for me for a bit too in the beginning. But now that I learned how to be more resourceful, like I wouldn't recommend this method, honestly. What you should do instead, let's say you have a level 25 echo and that's like fully maxed out and tuned 5 lines, and you don't really need it anymore, I would just discard them. So once you get an echo like that, just press discard or Z on your keyboard and mark them. And then later when you go to your bag and you look at your echoes, on the bottom right you see a trash can, click on that, and then you'll see all the echoes that you marked for discarding. And once you do this, you're going to get a certain amount of resources back, like sealed tubes and tuners back, for what you used. You don't get a lot of tuners back, but you get a good amount of tubes. So do this for like all the echoes that you know that you won't need anymore. You know, try to save like especially in the early and mid game, you still don't know like what to get rid of and stuff. So you might have to keep some. But if you know for sure, like a level 25 echo with no crits or like maybe one low crit line, just discard them. Okay, we finally made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. I wish you all the best echoes possibles with the best substats possible, and that you beat RNG. I have some character guides and some beginner guides you can check out on the left here. Thanks for watching again. Take care now. Bye.